Welcome back to Fuqua Sports. Today I'm reviewing my official win-loss predictions for every team from every conference. Starting with the American Athletic, I have Tulane winning the conference over Navy. Tulane did lose a ton from last year's team, but the Green Wave should remain contenders with a strong transfer portal class that ranks second in the conference. The talent is there for them to return to their fourth consecutive conference championship game, and I trust that experience alone is enough for them to walk into a bowl game as a conference champion. Last year, Navy beat Army in their annual rivalry matchup a week after Army won the conference championship, and then they followed that up with a win over Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl. Navy retains all of their skill positional players, and that chemistry alone should prove invaluable. Their first 6 conference games are all against the only 6 teams who finished with losing conference records in 2024, and how far they go in 2025 will be determined in their last 4 games of the season. Memphis I have coming in the 3rd with a chance to challenge for their 3rd consecutive double-digit win season in their bowl game. They return only 3 starters, but they bring in the conference's top recruiting class and the top transfer portal class. Memphis has a high ceiling but also a low floor, but I am leaning on their experienced coaching record to keep them afloat. It will be difficult for Army to repeat as champions as they lose AAC Offensive Player of the Year Bryson Daly. Also, the conference slate for 2025 is harder than last year's, and all of those losses to the transfer portal and graduation places Army in a tough spot. But nonetheless, they have its solid coaching personnel and a disciplined attack, so expect a winning season for the Black Knights. Last year, South Florida had to play 2 power conference teams in the non-conference, and the out-of-conference slate is arguably harder than having to play both Florida and Miami on the road, and also having to play Boise State. So I'm predicting an 0-3 start, but Coach Alex Golish got them out together the past couple years, and with the return of dynamic quarterback Byron Brown, I think the Bulls can really start to gain momentum towards the back half of the season. UTSA and East Carolina have productive quarterbacks who combined for 43 touchdowns a year ago, and both teams are coming off impressive wins in their respective bowl games. UTSA returns more starters than East Carolina does, but they return those starters on defense, which could be a problem. The defense needs time to gel, but that's going to be hard as they start on the road to Texas A&M and follow that up with a home game against Texas State, who beat them by 39 points in 2024. East Carolina must start on the road to NC State, a salty revenge-seeking crowd after a year ago. The Pirates also have to play BYU and 3 of the top 4 teams in the conference. So while these teams probably won't play for the conference championship, they will stack some wins because there's a clear talent gap between these teams and the rest of the conference. North Texas has not had a winning season since 2018, despite playing in a bowl game in 4 of the last 5 years. They also return 0 skill positional players, yet the Mean Green are still the conference's best bet for an extra bowl team. The problem for this conference as a whole is that every team besides Navy, Army, and South Florida, they all failed to return at least half of their starters from 2024. The ACC's future seems bleak, both Clemson and Florida State sticking around at least for now thanks to the new revenue distribution strategy. That's huge because those 2 and SMU are the only 3 teams from the conference to ever make the college football playoff. The ACC must make more strides so that they can keep up as best as possible with the Big Ten and the SEC. Dabo Swinney's team is loaded, with sides set past an ACC title and firmly on the national championship. Kay Klebnik returns at quarterback, and the Tigers have a few first-round draft-worthy defenders in TJ Parker, Peter Woods, and Avion Terrell. As long as the defensive unit improves from last year, Clemson will finally be back in the national contending form, a place they haven't really been at ever since the COVID season. And I'm betting that defense will gel as time goes on. Miami and SMU were flirting around the college football playoff bubble all last year, and both should be competitive again this year. Both are loaded in the transfer portal, and Miami acquired Carson Beck from Georgia, a nice successor to Cameron Ward. The past 2 years they've had dismal finishes, but I think the 3rd time's a charm, especially with Mario Cristobal's head coaching seat getting hotter and hotter. SMU bolstered their defense with much needed transfers, with their offense looking to continue to click under quarterback Kevin Jennings. Despite 2 straight 11-win seasons, this year's schedule appears to be more difficult, so we'll see how the Mustangs handle it in their 2nd year playing in a power conference slate. Behind them I have Louisville at 9-3 and Florida State a game back. All 4 of Louisville's losses last year were by 1 score, and Jeff Braun brings in a ton of new transfers to increase their depth. Quarterback Miller Moss needs to be more consistent, something he lacked at USC, in order for Louisville to contend for the ACC championship. Meanwhile, the morale around Florida State appears to be increasing as Mike Norvell revamped the coaching staff around him and helped the team through the Vision of Excellence campaign. However, they only returned 3 starters, none on offense, and all the transfers need to click for the Seminoles to have a nice bounce-back season. Georgia Tech suffered from a difficult schedule and a slew of injuries last year, and they still won 7 games. They returned 10 starters, and the healthy Yellow Jacket team can definitely fly under a bunch of people's radars. Duke returns 13 starters and brings in quarterback Darian Mensah from Tulane, with high hopes for him. Pittsburgh returns 15 starters from a team that started this season 7-0 a year ago. NC State was one of 5 schools with at least 8 wins every year from 2020 to 2023, so the Wolfpack look to return to their winning ways. They have 4 straight wins over in-state rival North Carolina, and it will be interesting to see how Bill Belichick meshes with the college scene. A lot of people are high on North Carolina because of Belichick's track record, but he's unproven in this new NIL and transfer portal era, and I don't think everything will click for the Tar Heels in year 1. Syracuse thrived last year thanks to several high-profile transfers and recruits and going 5-0 in the non-conference, but this year the Orange Man experienced so much roster turnover along with going from one of the nation's easiest schedules in 2024 to one of the hardest in 2025. I also think Virginia Tech can sneak into a bowl with so much postseason experience throughout the program's history, and the return of quarterback Kyron Jones. He just needs to stay healthy, but so many questions exist for the Hokies, along with everyone else at the bottom of the conference. The Big Ten Conference went 10 years without a national championship before Michigan and Ohio State holding back-to-back titles for the conference these past 2 seasons. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs returns for the Buckeyes, arguably the nation's best players for each side of the ball, and despite losing 14 players to the NFL draft, Ohio State brings in plenty of supporting talent. Another potential issue, Julian Sayin, the quarterback, has yet to start a game, but he is a 2023 5-star recruit, and a lot of people are hyping him up. Should he live up to the pressure, and I think he will, the Buckeyes could repeat as national champions. They have good leadership and have an 8-game win streak against Penn State, another team a lot of people are hyping up. The Nittany Lions have, I'd say, the best backfield in the nation. Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and Katron Allen, and a decent amount of impact starters on defense. But also much depends on their wide receivers. All of the starting receivers a year ago left the program, and as much success as Penn State has had over the years, the Nittany Lions have lost 15 straight games against teams ranked in the AP Top 7, going back to 2016. So until they prove it on the field, I'm kinda hesitant on elevating them all the way up to the national favorites tier. Despite their disappointing finish, we can't forget Oregon being the only team with an undefeated regular season in 2024. However, about 2/3 of the team's rushing and receiving production must be replaced, along with the quarterback. And on defense, 2/3 of their tackling production and almost 50% of their sack total also has to be replaced. Yet they bring in the Big Ten's top transfer portal class, which also ranks 5th in the nation, so I feel relatively confident about another return to the playoffs. Behind those 3, the picture gets foggier unless the Big Ten can get a 4th team into the playoff for the 2nd year in a row. Obviously, you have those 3 teams that people generally agree on. Last year, that 4th team was Indiana, a team who shocked the college football world after going 9-27 the past 3 years. The Hoosiers bring back a solid foundation from 2024's team and performed well in the portal, but they do face a more challenging schedule this year. Illinois is a trendy pick as they return the 17 starters and quarterback Luke Altmaier is in his senior year. People believe that they can be this season's Indiana and catch lightning in the bottle as a playoff threat. Michigan's riding a ton of momentum after season-ending wins against Ohio State and Alabama. You don't see that too often. The passing game is improved, and the defensive front loses a ton of production. But fortunately, besides Ohio State, all 8 of their other conference games are against teams who had losing Big Ten records in 2024. Obviously, you have Iowa and Kirk Ferentzen's ability to win 8 games every year for the past 10 years. For the first time in quite a while, though, the offense might go into the year on better footing than the defense, and the Hawkeyes are a team I believe a lot of people are sleeping on. You have Nebraska, and Matt Rule jumps into his 3rd year at the Huskers, and he has quite the track record of making drastic jumps in his 3rd year. For 7 straight years, a decade and a half ago, all they did was finish 9-4, and I think Matt Rule can get them to that point again. Lincoln Riley faces a lot of pressure at USC, but the Trojans are also sort of flying under the radar as they've quietly bolstered their offense with improved weaponry. However, a schedule that includes road visits to Illinois, Notre Dame, and Oregon, I think that might slow them down. A common theme last year in the Big Ten was the new West Coast teams struggling on road games, and I think that will hinder at least USC, Washington, and UCLA, despite the Huskies' recent national championship game appearance and the Bruins hauling in Nico Iamaleava. Heading into 2024 in the Big 12, the preseason media is top 5 and conference title contenders were Arizona, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Utah, while 4 of them missed a bowl game, and the 5th team lost 3 out of 4 in November, and the preseason media's last place team, Arizona State, ended up winning the conference. The other 3 teams that tied with the Sun Devils atop the standings, Iowa State, Colorado, and BYU, were picked by the media 6th, 11th, and 13th respectively, and Kansas, who missed a bowl game, beat all 3 of them in 3 consecutive weeks, being the first team in the history of college football to be unranked and beat 3 ranked teams in consecutive weeks. That's just life in the Big 12, where anybody's guess for a conference champion is as good as anyone else's. In fact, I'm not even going to point out a top 5 this year because the logjam of teams is just so great. So right now I'm leaning on Arizona State to successfully defend their title. They returned Sam Levitt, Jordan Tyson, and 15 other returning starters. The Sun Devils also returned their entire coaching staff. But even so, only one team in the 30-year history of the Big 12 has repeated as conference champion, and that team, Oklahoma, isn't even in the conference anymore. So if we do get a new champion, and history suggests so, Kansas State undoubtedly has the most year-to-year stability under experienced coach Chris Kleiman, but the Wildcats have to start fast, playing in 2025 season opener in Ireland against Iowa State. Yes, Farmageddon is not in the farms this year. Then they have to play Army, who won 12 games a year ago, and a non-conference road game to Arizona. BYU won 11 games a year ago, more than doubling their count from 2023, but half their games were one-possession games, and they had a winning record in said games. They returned 11 starters, which is fine, but again, Big 12 conference play is going to be a train wreck. Texas Tech holds in the nation's second best transfer portal class along with 8 returning starters. I'm starting to like them more and more as the offseason progresses, as they look to reach the Big 12 championship game for the first time in school history and maybe even win it while they're at it. Iowa State started 7-0 before a frustrating 4-3 finish, but they did make it to the Big 12 championship game, and they had a double-digit win season for the first time in 133 years, and returned over half their starters, including quarterback Rocco Becht, 4 out of 5 across the offensive line, and multiple pieces from a stingy defense. At Baylor, once Sawyer Robertson took over at quarterback, the Bears had one of the nation's hottest finishes, ending the regular season on a 6-game win streak, nearly tripling their win count from 2023. TCU quarterback Josh Hoover ranked second in the Big 12 last year with almost 4,000 yards passing. He returns along with pieces in the secondary as Sonny Dykes looks to return to the national championship game from a couple years ago. You also have Utah and Kansas. Both were preseason favorites in 2024 and both missed a bowl game. Utah returns their entire offensive line and boasts an experienced secondary. For Kansas, I mentioned it previously, but they played spoiler last year, 3 times in fact at the end of the season, and Jalen Daniels is in his 6th year at quarterback as the Jayhawks return much of their defensive front. Kansas went 1-5 in one-possession games, so you'd think that would even out for the Jayhawks this season. And you can't forget about Deion Sanders at Colorado lurking in the background. They finished tied for first in the Big 12 in 2024, and despite working with a harder schedule in 2025, they do boast a big senior class for this upcoming season. The Conference USA was absolutely gutted by conference realignment, falling to only 5 schools in 2023 before adding Jacksonville State and Sam Houston from the FCS, along with Liberty and New Mexico State. Last year they recruited Kennesaw State from the FCS, and this year they got 2 more FCS teams in Missouri State and Delaware to make it 7 new schools, 5 of them being from the FCS in 3 years. And among yearly turnover of teams, this made the conference rather unpredictable, especially after the top 3 teams listed in the graphic. In 2022, the first season in 18 years without divisions, the best team that's still in the conference today was Western Kentucky, followed by Middle Tennessee. In 2023, it's Liberty, then New Mexico State, then Jacksonville State. In 2024, it was Jacksonville State and Sam Houston, the 2 FCS additions from the year prior. Louisiana Tech had a stretch of 7 consecutive bowl games, and there's going to be no stability because UTEP is joining the Mountain West next year. The Conference USA, without a doubt, undergoes the most changes from year to year, and sometimes a dynamic conference makes for quite a bit of fun. I have Western Kentucky winning the conference championship despite the win-loss record. They have to play road games against LSU out of the SEC, and against Toledo, who hasn't had a losing season since 2009. Meanwhile, Liberty doesn't have to play a power conference team in the non-conference. Additionally, the Hilltoppers have to play 3 out of 4 of my other top 5 teams in the conference, whereas the Flames only have to play 1. The Hilltoppers gained prolific passer Maverick McIver. He will definitely provide veteran leadership in the locker room. Western Kentucky also has the longest postseason streak of any team in the conference. Liberty adds transfer quarterback Ethan Vasco and retains senior back Julian Gray, which should at least lessen the impact of losses of Caden Salter and Quentin Cooley. Additionally, a veteran secondary and a pair of pass rushers in TJ Bush and CJ Brazil return to bolster the defense. I truly believe that the winner of their Week 2 matchup on the road against Jacksonville State will be in the Conference USA Championship game, which I'm predicting will be the Hilltoppers, and Liberty and Western Kentucky avoid each other in the regular season, but in the Conference Championship game, I trust that Western Kentucky's experience and consistency in conference play will guide them to their first conference title since 2016. You got FCS newbies, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston, who have both risen to the top of the conference. However, both bring in new head coaches, and Jacksonville State's head coach has never held that position before. Also, both teams return only 5 starters each, but both teams should be in the upper echelon of the conference because of the strong foundations that they already have, combined with no other clear consensus threats in the conference beyond the top 4 teams. The conference has only sent 15 teams to a bowl game in the past 3 seasons. That's averaging 5 per year, and I don't think that will change this year. Who's going to be that 15 in the postseason? I'm going to lean towards Middle Tennessee. They return 12 starters, second in the conference only to Delaware. And I'm not saying returning a lot of starters will be the difference maker, especially since Middle Tennessee only won 3 games last year. But quarterback Nick Vattiata returns, and he surpassed 3,000 yards passing in each of the past 2 seasons, and the defensive front returns a lot. No one's really talking about Middle Tennessee, but I think they can be a sneaky dark horse team that could possibly make some noise in the conference title race come November. We go from the most unstable conference in terms of membership to the most stable in the Mid-American Conference. The MAC will add Massachusetts from the Independents, but before then, they haven't seen a change in membership since 2005, and they haven't added a team since 1997. The vast majority of these teams enter the 2025 season with gigantic question marks at quarterback. Only 4 teams return their starting quarterbacks in 2024, Toledo, Ohio, Central Michigan, and Akron. and Akron can't even make it to a bowl game because of their academic record. And among quarterback battles this spring, several coaches have voiced their frustrations over losing their quarterbacks to power conference teams, but the defending regular season champion Miami was one of the lucky schools in the transfer portal. They had years of continuity with Brett Gabbert at quarterback. He's been there since 2019. After his graduation, the Redhawks lucked out by getting former Baylor quarterback DeQuan Finn to transfer down to the Group of 5 level. This will be Finn's 7th year at the college level, meaning Miami will go back to the drawing board next season. But in this day and age, coaches understand the need for an established quarterback who has a ready-to-win philosophy. But when picking my conference champion, I lean towards stability and consistency, and Miami has tons of new faces that need to work instantly, having lost all of their offensive starters from 2024. Toledo returns 12 starters and hasn't had a losing season since 2009. The Rockets entered the offseason with momentum following a 6-overtime win over Pittsburgh in the postseason. The offense should be explosive, and the defense, which returns the entire secondary, can be among the league's best. They're also in a prime opportunity to pile up wins, only facing one power conference team, and that team being a mediocre Kentucky team. Ohio, the defending champion, is in a similar boat, returning quarterback Parker Navarro, a bunch of other skill positional players, and much of their secondary as well. Having won 31 games in 3 years, Ohio is definitely an attractive program for recruits looking to jump into and start for a Division I FBS program. But Tim Albin, the coach who led the Bobcats to their first conference title in 56 years, got poached by Charlotte, and Ohio may be looking down the barrel of an 0-3 start, opening 2025 against 3 consecutive power conference teams. Buffalo returns 14 starters from a team that tripled their win total last year from 2023, and they won only their 4th bowl game in school history. So there's reason for optimism that the Bulls can compete for a conference championship, but much of their success, in my opinion, depends on if Buffalo can find a leader at quarterback and if they can shore up their special teams unit as well. Northern Illinois has historically been atop the conference. They've been a power conference program in 3 of the last 4 years, and had a 5-year stretch lately where they won 57 games in those 5 seasons. This is their last year in the conference, so we'll see if they can bring home a conference title, but it'll be tough, especially with weaknesses in the trenches on both sides of the ball. You have all 3 of the Michigan schools who all return a decent number of returning starters. I believe Central Michigan has the best chance to reach the postseason as they return their starting quarterback and have the easiest conference schedule, in my opinion, over the other 2 teams. But Western Michigan returns the most amount of starters, and Eastern Michigan plays only 1 power conference program in the non-conference compared to Central and Western. You have to play 2. So they could take advantage of the non-conference schedule, even though I'm predicting they won't. But many of these MAC schools have to toggle between the fear of losing a developing standout at quarterback and also finding a new one who fits their system and culture. The Mountain West won't see a change in membership this year, and they haven't for 13 years, but this year marks the final season for Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, San Diego State, and Utah State. That's huge as they lose markets from the Bay Area, San Diego, and the entire states of Idaho and Utah. And Boise State, their crown jewel program who brought the conference their only college football playoff appearance, is among one of the 5 teams leaving the conference. Here's a wild statistic for you. Only 8 schools have ever won the Mountain West in its 26-year history. BYU, Utah, TCU, Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, San Diego State, and Utah State. That is of course excluding San Jose State from that weird COVID season. But by 2026, the departure of those 5 schools mean that every team who have ever won the Mountain West Championship will have left the conference. But for 2025, Boise State should still be a force to be reckoned with and probably the Group of 5 favorite to make the college football playoff. I would argue that the loss of Heisman Trophy runner-up Ashton Jeanty won't hurt the team as much as one might think. It will definitely spread out the offensive attack and won't make the offense so one-dimensional. The Broncos boast the return of quarterback Maddox Madsen, a veteran offensive line, and a 1-2 punch of Dylan Riley and Fresno State transfer Malik Sherrod. Also, they only have to play 1 power conference team. They get to play UNLV, Fresno State, and Colorado State all at home. UNLV will remain a title threat after lavishing the largest contract in conference history in Dan Mullen. Mullen has 13 years of head coaching experience, all in the SEC and winning over 100 games. The Rebels lose 10 All-Mountain West players from a year ago and only return 2 starters, 1 on each side of the ball. But they do boast an experienced staff, as well as transfer quarterbacks Alex Orji from Michigan and Anthony Colandrea from Virginia battling for the starting job. Both are dual-threat quarterbacks, and as of now, Colandrea has proven himself more and has more experience. But I do think Orji fits the UNLV scheme a bit better, but he does need to make significant strides in the passing game. But it will definitely be a close and intense battle to watch for this summer. In 2024, San Jose State's pass-first offensive scheme worked under Louis Manololo's first year as head coach. I was hesitant on the Spartans before the season because Louis Manololo led the triple-option run game at Navy, but the Spartans' passing attack ranked 5th in the nation, and they returned an experienced offensive line in hopes of improving the run game, which ranked all the way down at 130th. Fresno State, Air Force, and Colorado State are the next teams up. Fresno State welcomes Matt Entz as head coach, who went 60-11 and won 2 FCS national championships in 5 years at North Dakota State. Despite ranking in the bottom 30 in the nation and returning productivity, they have proven success with 13 bowl appearances in the last 18 years years under 5 different head coaches. Air Force and Colorado State both have coaching continuities, both have momentum. Air Force closed the 2024 season on a 4-game win streak, and Colorado State won 8 games, their most in a decade. But the transfer portal hit both teams in bad ways, and both face high pressures in 2025 with expectations for Air Force to return to their lofty standards, and Colorado State to continue to grow and win more often ahead of their move to the Pac-12. Awaiting the debut of Northern Illinois and UTEP in 2026, the conference will look a lot different then. But as for 2025, return for the college football playoff is not out of the question for top teams like Boise State or UNLV. I don't think I've ever seen a year in the SEC where the conference from top to bottom is so deep. And I mean, the ESPN FBI ranked 13 SEC teams in their top 25. That's over half the rankings filled with SEC teams and over 80% of the conference in their rankings. With so many teams capable of finding spots inside the preseason top 25, the SEC aims to end the Big Ten's 2-year reign atop the college football world. The conference's 2025 campaign will be defined by whether or not these talent-rich elite programs meet their lofty expectations. Georgia lost quarterback Carson Beck to the transfer portal, but their ability to fill every void every single year makes me not so worried about this team. And the Bulldogs haul in the nation's second-best recruiting class. Steve Sarkisian and Texas have come up short in the playoff semifinals in back-to-back seasons and now have quarterback Arch Manning running the show. While I think Georgia wins in Athens for the regular season title, I believe Texas can pull it off in the SEC championship game and get a first-round bye in the playoffs. Ty Simpson is Alabama's new starter in the center, selected by first-year offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, with hopes to bring the Crimson Tide back to prominence. This season is vital for head coach Kalen DeBoer to gain back some of the fanbase's trust after a disappointing finish to 2024. A breakthrough is needed for Brian Kelly at LSU, whose 29 wins over his 3 seasons at head coach hasn't turned heads the way it should have, given the national title winning seasons under the previous 3 coaches. Tigers quarterback Garrett Nussmeier should challenge Manning as the best quarterback in the SEC. At Florida, Billy Napier's hot seat has cooled significantly, and the Gators are hoping to transition from playing spoiler to genuinely contending for the SEC championship themselves. Loaded on offense, it's a unit on defense that will tell you just how far this team can go. South Carolina won 6 consecutive games to end the regular season, just barely missing out on the college football playoff. A similar finish for the Gamecocks would further Shane Beamer's rapid ascension in the coaching ranks as a leader who has embraced the transfer portal. Texas A&M is in the preseason top 10 for quite a bit of people. I mean, hey, the off-season hype affects us all sometimes. But in this case, until they prove it, I'm not buying it. They signed the SEC's 6th best portal class, but suffered significant losses defensively to the NFL draft. Tennessee might experience the biggest drop-off after parting ways with Nico Iamaleava. Ole Miss and Oklahoma also both experienced significant roster turnover. For the Sooners, they haul in only the SEC's 7th best portal class, and all of a sudden, everyone thinks they'll ascend from 6 and 7 all the way up to serious playoff contender status. I'm also not really buying the hype, and if you watch my top 136 rankings, the Sooners had all this hype in 2024. I was the lowest on them, and I was right because they finished with a losing record, and now I'm the lowest on them for 2025. They'll need all of their pieces to click, and they'll need it fast. Auburn hopes this 1-3 record and 1-possession games and its inept passing performance will both improve in 2025. Missouri hopes to build on its 21 wins over the past 2 seasons. They're better off flying under the radar, and Eli Drinkwitz consistently does more with less. Then you have the bottom 4 teams who should all be contending for a bowl game in November, especially given that 3 of these teams return their starting quarterbacks, and all of these teams address weaknesses in the transfer portal. It's just unfortunate that wins are so hard to come by in the ever-so-deep Southeastern Conference. The Sun Belt has the glorious distinction of being the only conference remaining with divisions. You love to see it, since divisions were so integral to the sport before the NIL and transfer portal era. Enjoy it, guys, because this might be the last year with divisions, as Texas State is off to Pac-12 starting in 2026, and thus offsetting the divisions. The NIL and portal era is being felt across all the Group of 5 conferences for sure, with power conference schools stripping the Sun Belt of its 2024 all-conference teams. Like literally, no underclassman who earned first-team All-Sun Belt honors returns in 2025 to the team he played for in 2024. But all that turmoil figures to result in pretty mixed up division races. James Madison and Georgia Southern figure to fight it out in the East. For the Dukes, even with the transfer of receiver Yamir Knight and the question of quarterback Alonzo Barrett's leg injury, the offense should carry the team. Quarterback Matthew Suluka, who left UNLV over an NIL dispute, will be ready to step in if Barrett isn't completely healthy. And George Pettaway and Io Adeye pack a powerful 1-2 punch at running back for James Madison. Georgia Southern has an experienced quarterback, always a good place to start, in J.C. French V, who averaged 218 passing yards per game last year. But much of their success will rest on their defense and how their transfer players respond. They were in the driver's seat for a spot in the Sun Belt Championship last year after big wins against James Madison and Marshall before suffering tough upset losses to Old Dominion Troy. Appalachian State will be looking to recover from a 6th place finish in the East. Up until last year, they've never had a losing season ever since returning to the FBS level a decade ago. With transfer quarterback AJ Swan, look for the Mountaineers to climb back up the standings as long as all the transfer players mesh from the get-go, because Appalachian State only returns 5 starters. For everyone else in the East Division, tons of new players and coordinators are incoming, and a lot of pieces are going to have to fall in the right places for a return to the postseason. Meanwhile, you have 5 teams in the West, a lucky break or 2 away from making the conference championship. Louisiana has won the division 5 times in the 7 years that the conference has had divisions. They got former 5-star recruit and Ole Miss transfer quarterback Walker Howard, and the defensive line will be stingy, but a rebuilt back 7 will have to come through in a big way. South Alabama and Texas State both have uncertainties at quarterback, but both have good options from the transfer portal. Also, both don't return a ton of starters in general. South Alabama looked to be the favorite to emerge in the West Division until their quarterback from 2024, Gio Lopez, transferred out of the program in the spring portal time slot. Arkansas State made a nice move up the standings last year to finish 2nd in the West behind Louisiana and seems to be reaping dividends from recent solid recruiting classes. Quarterback Jalen Rayner passed for 214 yards per game in 2024, and he looks for a strong season again in 2025. Troy's the only other team to ever win the West Division along with Louisiana. They won it twice. A 3rd championship probably won't happen for the Trojans, as they're hoping a ton of transfers will improve a defense that gave up almost 6 yards a play and over 90% scoring in the red zone in 2024. But the margin that separates these teams in the West is so small, but I'm leaning on Louisiana's postseason experience to get the job done. We wrap up our college football win-loss predictions with the 2 Valiant teams from the Pac-12. The teams didn't retain their scheduling agreement with the Mountain West this season, so to fill out their schedule, they will play each other twice. The last time 2 FBS teams played each other twice in the regular season was in 2018 between Liberty and New Mexico State, and before that, it was in 1945 between USC, UCLA, and California. Washington State just went through their 3rd season in a row, starting fast, climbing up the top 25 rankings, only to completely fall apart in November. Last year, they started 8-1 and squarely in the college football playoff conversation before finishing 0-4. In 2023, they started 4-0 and ranked 13th before finishing 5-7. In 2022, they started 4-1 before finishing 7-6. The fan base has a phrase for these November collapses. Wazoo had a real meaningful chance, and they could get every single time. Oregon State has had similar collapses, starting in 2023 8-1 before finishing 8-5, and starting 2024 4-1 before finishing 5-7 and missing a bowl game. Both teams got hit hard by the transfer portal again, especially Washington State. The Cougars also lost their head coach after Jake Dickert left for Wake Forest, and it comes after Dickert told the team in preparation for the bowl game that they were family and that he'd never leave them. And now look. But they'll get better leadership because in comes Jimmy Rogers at head coach, who went 27-3 and won an FCS national championship in 2 years at South Dakota State. And following Rogers is what seems like half the Jackrabbit team, so the team synergy will be there for the Cougars. Oregon State suffered mightily from injuries, finishing their first post-Pac-12 disintegration season 1-6. Their final 4 losses by an average of 23 points. This year, head coach Trent Bray will also move back to the assistant defensive coordinator, and the Beavers return many skill positional players. The addition of Duke transfer Malik Murphy at quarterback could provide the shakeup the Beavers needed to get back on track, because for both teams, with a schedule that doesn't feature a ton of high-end competition, both teams should pile up some wins and return to the postseason. I have Connecticut also returning to a bowl after a 9-win campaign a year ago, tied for their most in school history as an FBS program. And lastly, the 2024 national runner-up Notre Dame. I have them matching their 2024 record of 11-1, that one loss ideally not against a group of 5 school, but the Fighting Irish responded valiantly from their loss to Northern Illinois, winning 13 straight games afterwards, including their first New Year's Six Bowl since 1993. After falling to Ohio State in the championship game, Notre Dame has to replace more than half their starters, yet Marcus Freeman has been so consistent during his time at the program, so I'm not worried about it. And if you think about it, if you look at Notre Dame's schedule, it's at home against Texas A&M, who they beat on the road last year, home against Boise State, who's still a group of 5 team, home against USC, who they've beaten 6 out of the last 7 games, and a bunch of mid to low tier ACC teams. The only caveat is a season opening road game against Miami, or of course a group of 5 team like Boise State or Navy. But still, the offensive line has tons of experience as well as the secondary, and the schedule allows Notre Dame to finish the regular season hot and gain momentum before the playoffs, which is always what you want.